Hey, this is Dave with Brass Call, and today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to do a presentation that I go out and give to different community groups and prepping groups, and we're going to talk about why prepping is important, why be self-reliant, why try to live more resiliently. Okay, and for this presentation, we're going to use the examples of NOAA and the ARK. Okay, now I know this isn't the typical gun thing, and I know y'all are preppers anyway, or most of the people listening to the show are preppers. And you know, it's not necessarily that I'm giving you any knowledge that you don't already have. Hopefully, we'll have a little bit of new stuff, but really, um, we're going to talk more about ways that you can spread the message and maybe have people stop thinking we're crazy, right? Because everybody that is a prepper knows that this stuff is important, why it's important, and we get it. So basically, we're going to try to give you a little bit of knowledge for your own prepping, but mostly this presentation is about giving you some tools to discuss it with people who don't get it. Okay? So I guess first thing we should say is, why do I think I'm qualified to tell you about prepping? And I don't know everything. I'm the first one to admit it, but a little bit about my experience. I've worked in emergency management full time for almost 9 years now, right? I worked several presidentially declared disasters, out in the field responding at State Emergency Operations Center. So I've seen lots of different ways of doing things, from Katrina to Gustav to the May 2010 floods, the Tuscaloosa tornadoes. Do a lot of planning for catastrophic disasters. And in the course of my full-time employment, I've taken thousands of hours of classes. I'm a hazmat tech, lots of instructor credentials, whatever, right? I've also been a firearm instructor for the past 10 years. But that doesn't make me an expert in preparedness. And neither does the nearly 30 years I have reading books and studying self-reliance and personal prepping topics, right? And I'm not going to sit up here and tell you I know everything and I'm smarter than you, because everything that I do teaches me that there's more stuff I need to know, right? And so on the Shepherd School website, the www.TN gun site, basically that site is a journey of my own self-discovery and knowledge, and me trying to pass on what I've learned by actually getting out and doing it, right? Reading books, studying, taking classes, all of that is a far cry from actually physically getting out and doing the things that you think you'll need. And this presentation is a little bit about that, okay? There's a pretty prevalent Christian parable talking about sheep and wolves and shepherds, right? And the firearm community has co-opted that and made a big deal about sheepdogs are people who, have the ability to fight, and that they fight wolves, which wolves would be bad people who prey on the innocent, in order to protect the sheep, which would be people who cannot protect themselves. And I think that's a very good concept. It's a very good idea, and I'm happy that the gun community has embraced that, okay? And like the gun community, I do know that there's bad men out there, right? And I believe that it's my job to protect the sheep in my life, the people under me, that I have a duty to protect, right? But the shepherd school is a little bit different, and it's not necessarily a play on words, but I think using the term shepherd instead of sheepdog better defines what I'm doing, okay? Shepherd isn't because I'm trying to stand out and be better than sheepdog. It's because I have a lot more tools, and my mindset is a lot more broad. It's not just, shepherds don't just fight wolves, right? That's not the only way they protect their sheep. If their flock is hungry, a shepherd finds them food. If it's storming, a shepherd finds his flock shelter. If a sheep falls off a cliff, the shepherd performs first aid, right? And it's my job to protect everyone in my family and provide what they need, whether or not it's something that I necessarily want to do. I like shooting, I like guns, but I also know that I have to do things that I don't like, like take out the garbage and work out in the yard. right? And that's what a shepherd does, whatever is needed to protect his flock. Also, um, the whole idea of shepherds uh, says that, I have my flock. It's not all shepherds against all wolves to protect all sheep, right? As a shepherd, I protect my flock. That's where my duty lies. However, um, with the concept of sheepdogs against wolves, it tends to be all sheepdogs against all wolves. And just because you have a CCW or a carry permit doesn't give you the right or the duty to act against all bad guys, right? That's discouraged. A lot of cases it can get you in legal trouble. However, I want to teach and have outreach. My basic goal is to teach me, for me to learn. But I know the better prepared everyone is, the more we can get this preparedness message out, the more people we can prepare. That's, more shepherds out there, and the more shepherds, the more sheepdogs, the less wolves have to go out and eat, right? So I'm stronger the more preppers that I can help train or teach or create, right? And that's what the Shepherd School is about. That being said, it really doesn't matter how good a prepper you are, how long you've been prepping, how long you know, how much you know. Nobody is truly self-reliant. Nobody can do everything, and everyone is interconnected. And for homework, if you so choose, go and Google Leonard Read and his essay, I Pencil, and it explains about the interconnectedness. And it was written back in the 1800s about a pencil, from the perspective of a pencil. Somebody's modernized it and said, I mouse, talking about a computer mouse. But basically it says, millions of people know what pencils are. Kids use them every day. It's pretty much the simplest tool out. But no one single person can make a pencil. If you go out and you mine the graphite, you can't build the truck to ship the graphite from the mine to the plant where it mills it. You can't make the milling machine. The people who make the milling machine don't know how to use the milling machine to mill the graphite. The people that cut the trees down aren't the same people that turn it into blanks or turn it in a lathe or glue it together or paint it yellow or mine the rubber, right? All the things that goes in a pencil, it takes hundreds of thousands of people in various jobs to get it done, right? So just because you can't do everything, though, doesn't mean that you can't do something, right? And a lot of folks talk about preppers as being paranoid or tin hat or conspiracy theorist or whatever. But I would point out everybody's a prepper. Everybody's got car insurance or health insurance or, a Band-Aid in the bathroom. All of prepping is working the percentages. If all you have is car insurance and Band-Aids, then you're more prepared than, 1% of the population, right? So 99% of the population has more than just Band-Aids in their closet. All a prepper does is try to be more prepared in working the percentages. However, it doesn't matter how much you do, you're never going to be 100% ready for everything and truly 100% off-grid self-reliant. Let's spitball some numbers, and let's just say that all you have is a 72-hour kit, the ability to take care of yourself for 72 hours. That puts you more prepared than most of the population. It puts you about 50% prepared. If you go ahead and upgrade that, you have your incremental plan where every time you go to the grocery store, you spend another 10 or 20 bucks and build you about a 6-month or a year food pantry. Makes you more prepared than about 85% of the people. A lot of folks say it, not a lot of people do it. Now, if you want to go ahead and make the big commitment and go off grid, go prep steading, right? Get a rural homestead, produce your own tools, learn to blacksmith, make your own weapons, make your own parts. It's going to make you more prepared than about 95% of the population. But remember, nobody gets 100%. And look at the difference between 50 and 95. So you get to a point of diminishing returns. Going from 95% to 96% is going to cost you more money than it took you to get to 85%, right? And so you have to keep that in mind and make sure that what you're doing is realistic, okay? So if you can ever be 100% prepared, what do you do? And let me just tell you, I don't know, because I'm not you, right? I can't tell you what you need to do because I'm not familiar with your needs. Okay, so all I can do is tell you what I do. What I do is I practice risk management. And so when I look at prepping, I look at what threats and risks are in my life. So I perform a risk assessment. I don't have to worry about tsunamis because I live in Tennessee and we don't have tsunamis, right? I live on a hill, so I don't really have to worry about flooding, okay? So I don't deal with those things. And then what I do, once I learn what risks and threats and hazards I face, I prioritize those threats based upon how likely they are to occur, and if they were to occur, how would they impact my life? It's not very likely that we would have an asteroid hit the planet, right? But if it did, it would be catastrophic. So let's say it's 0% or 1% likely, right, and 100% catastrophic. So I multiply that out, and I get a score of 100, right? There's not a lot I could do about it, but it would kill us, right? Then let's look at, say, burglary, right? It's pretty likely, say 20% likely somebody would burgle our house. And if they come in and took all my prepping supplies, that would be pretty catastrophic. I could replace it, but we'll say 80. So I multiply 80, by that 20, I get 160. So that's more likely, and it's not as catastrophic, but it's a lot more likely. But 160 is bigger than 100. So if I have two things to prep for, asteroid hitting the Earth or guy break into my house, I'm going to put more of my resources into guy breaking into my house. Does that make sense? Right? So once I decide what I'm going to plan for, I look at my resources. What do I already have? Right? And then what I do is I create a plan. Now, when I write my plan, I try to be realistic in my assumptions. Right? I want to make sure that my plan is realistic, that it's likely, right? That it's not based upon wanting to be cool or feel good, right? I'd rather look at my plan and be realistic and maybe have a little bit of a downer, at this is hard, right? Than slap something together to make myself feel better, but then not have a workable plan. But one way or the other, once the plan's done, then I have to practice it because it's really easy to write things down, based upon your own prejudices about what works and what doesn't, but you don't have a good background in the realities of it. So when you go out and practice your plan, then you start finding mistakes. And I'll give you an example. My first wife, she really didn't like prepping, but her dad was a cop, and she had this unreasonable fear that people would home invade us, whatever, because, to get back at her dad. So we had, defensive plans. She was very conscious defensively, but that was the only thing that she worried about. So we had a plan, what would happen if somebody broke in the house. So basically, she'd get the phone and the pistol and call the police. Kid would go hide in the closet, and I'd stand in the hallway with the shotgun and say, if you come in this hall, I'm going to shoot you, and the police are on its way. Right? And that sounds real good, thinking about it, that sounds real smart. But then when we actually practiced it, we realized that the closet the kid was supposed to get into was the wall that my back was up against as I'm standing there preparing for a two-way gun range, right? And, if the kid's sitting there crouched down on the floor behind me, nothing separating them and bullets coming at me but a sheetrock wall, well, that's not very realistic. That's not a good plan. So we had to reevaluate our plan, and we only learned that once we practiced it. Now, as you practice your plan, and we'll talk about that a little later, but as you practice your plan, guess what? You're going to find things that you can improve on. Things that you're like, man, I can't believe that I forgot about this, or, man, that was a stupid idea. But, I train, and training lets me think more accurately about what's going on, so that I make a better plan, and then I practice the plan, and that gets me better skills, better knowledge, better understanding of what I'm doing, and then I rewrite my plan, right? And then I train some more based upon what I learned from exercising my plan, and then I take those new skills and new capabilities, new equipment, and I improve my plan, and then I test it, and I learn more, weaknesses. And so By constantly improving my plan, constantly gaining more skills, constantly getting more knowledge, constantly getting more equipment, I become better and better at being prepared. I guess the burning question is, where the heck does that fit in with Noah? Okay? And if you'll hold on for just a second, I will tell you. First off, Noah was warned, right? And it doesn't matter if you're divinely inspired like Noah was and God comes down and says, look, dude, this is happening, right? And if you look at the Bible, and there's several passages and scriptures talking about the need to be prepared throughout the Old Testament to the New Testament till Revelations, right? But, not everybody believes that, and this isn't the venue, I guess, to discuss that. So it doesn't matter if you're divinely inspired or if you just watch the news or, you have reasonable intelligence and you understand basic economics and history and sociology and the cyclical nature of human interaction. Or you could just have a gut feeling, right? But if you think that there is a strong possibility of coming upheaval or natural disaster or just something, right? And you want to prepare, then you probably should. And if something bothers you, it's taking away your peace of mind, right? And we don't want it to eat away at you. We want you to be happy and successful and satisfied in your life. So if something bothers you, do something about it, right? I'm not scared because I'm prepared. The things that look out and I see and I think, man, that could really mess my day up. Well, I do something about it, right? Whether it's just there's some little thugs looking all crazy at the grocery store and I walk around them and I don't go over that way, till, I think I need better house insurance because stuff happens, right? If it bothers you, do something about it so you don't have to sit and live in fear, right? If prepping doesn't make your life easier, doesn't make you more comfortable, doesn't make you feel more at ease, then you're doing it wrong. So here's this old guy, right? And he spends, a couple hundred years building this boat that's bigger than a football field, right? In the middle of a desert. I mean, can you imagine what people said, right? You had lots and lots of people out there just hating on him, just woodpeckers pecking on his art. Man, you're stupid. Why are you doing this? Come on, dude. You don't need a big boat. Did you see the big screen, rock, script that we carve on at the house that we play Scrabble on? Did you see the new addition I put on my house? Why are you doing all that? That's crazy, right? And it was like that then, it's like that now. Because not everybody understands the need to become self-reliant, right? Not everybody believes that they should prepare for future disasters, right? It takes a lot of self-discipline to be a prepper because you're taking time and resources and money in the good times, right? When you can't see the trouble, and putting aside to make your life easier during times of trouble. And not everybody sees that. Not everybody can do that. And so a lot of people think you're crazy. And a subset of those people who think you're crazy will say, hey, dude, there's an emergency. I don't need to prepare. I'm just coming to your house. And guess what? I hear that all the time. And you know what I've taken to say? Fine, buddy, but you better bring 1,000 rounds of 6 months of food. And they look at me. You wouldn't let me come in. I said, dude, if you tried, I would shoot you. But we're friends. We are. But you ain't my family. I love everybody, but I love me more. And that sounds bad, but, if they want to buy bass boats and things, they season tickets to games. That's cool. I would love to do that too, but I want to make sure my family's fed first. And so a lot of people think that's crazy. If you look at the psychology around bad guys, you'll see drug dealers and all sorts of folks like that, drug users. They want to be around people that are like them, right? And they want to convince other people that what they're doing is okay because it is uncomfortable being wrong. And if you're prepping and they're not, then that makes them feel uncomfortable because what if you were right, right? So a lot of people won't like it simply because it makes them feel bad. And the best way to deal with the woodpeckers pecking on your ark, poking holes in your plan, is operational security. And that's just an easy, simple way, or a complicated way, I guess, of saying privacy. If people don't have a need to know that you're a prepper, don't tell them. And I've kind of screwed that up, because I had a business teaching guns, and it just kind of grew from that. And I wanted people to know I had guns and training, so they could come and take my firearm classes. And when I started doing prepping stuff, I thought it was neat and I wanted to share it. And I still think it's neat and I want to share it. But if I had everything to go to do over again, then you probably wouldn't know I was from Tennessee, and you probably wouldn't know my name. So please take my advice. And if you're afraid that people may want to come and take your stuff, then be careful who you tell that you have stuff. It's easy to get overwhelmed, especially if you're a new prepper, but us old preppers get overwhelmed too. There's a lot of stuff to do, and looking at current trends, you can think that you may not have a lot of time. So like I said, it's easy to get overwhelmed. And so the way I deal with that is I have goals, both short, medium, and long-term goals, and I know where I want to be. I know the direction, right? And with that, I am what's called flexibly rigid, right? I'm flexible as long as it's not harming my forward movement toward my long-term goal, right? My plan is to have a homestead that I can retire to, off-grid and all that. And I know there's lots and lots of skills and resources that I need to acquire between now and then. And, short term, I might plan, say I'm going to learn how to, beat metal and blacksmith, whatever. And that's what my plan is for this week. Well, if something happens, I'm flexible enough to change the direction as long as whatever I'm doing is working toward that long-term goal, right? And part of that is I have a list of needs, things that I should be on the lookout for. And when the things cost resources, things to buy, I have, what a good deal is, what a great deal is, and what things should normally cost. And with that, being married, part of that is I know how much I can spend without the wife being mad at me. I don't want to buy a prepping item that impacts the financial resources of my family. I want to make sure the lights are on too. And, the wife knows, what these lists are. And so when I find a good deal that fits in that price range, I can go ahead and jump on it, right? So, what did Noah put in the ark? Well, one of the things he put in the ark, obviously, was food. And it's really easy to get in this whole store a bunch of long-term freeze-dried stuff. But I would tell you it's better, at least for short-term prepping, to think of foods that you eat now and find foods that fit in with what you need. If you go cold turkey from, Burger King and McDonald's and try to go to whole wheat, you say you do the Mormon stores and most of what you got is wheat and gluten. Your body can't tolerate that. You'll have all sorts of side effects, from not being able to poop to you might have gluten allergies, right? So try to store food that you eat and eat the types of food that you store, and prioritize it. And your first priority should be that 3-day, 72-hour kit to 1 week supply of food, for those short-term emergencies. And for short-term emergencies, I would look to store food that are simple, convenient, shelf-stable. We keep a lot of canned soups and MREs and things that, you can just pop a top on and eat, and it doesn't take a lot of electricity or trouble. For long-term food, 6 months, a year, a decade, whatever you feel like you need, there's lots of different options. But because resources are limited in my household, we tend to go with the Mormon standard, which is 400 pounds of some sort of grains, 60 pounds of some sort of protein, beans, whatever, 60 pounds of sugar, 8 pounds of salt. And because the salt isn't just for seasoning and cooking, but it's also for food preservation, at least half of that needs to be non-iodized, right? 16 pounds of powdered milk, and if you've got kids, triple that. 4 gallons of some sort of oil or fat, and 2 pounds each of yeast, baking powder, baking soda. And that equals about 1 pound per person per day. which if you multiply it out and realize that a 5-gallon bucket holds about 44 pounds of wheat, that's going to give you approximately 30 5-gallon buckets if you have a family of 4. Right now, that's a lot of space, but the trade-off is that's one of the most inexpensive ways of getting a large supply of food stored. And as you store this food, you also have to think about appetite fatigue. Who wants to eat nothing but, powdered milk and a loaf of bread every day, right? And so I would just go back to the whole tiers and levels. Once you've got a good basic store of food, then you can start stocking things that are nice to have, things like fruit and spices and, in our case, chocolate. I'm well known at the household for taking Hershey bars and putting in the bottom of the freezer underneath the frozen water, or taking mason jars and putting a bunch of hard candies in them and sealing them up, vacuum sealing, and keeping things like Mountain Dews, Diet Mountain Dews, stored away, because I know my wife likes those things. And in times of stress, it's real nice to say, okay, babe, take a deep breath, everything's fine. It can't be all bad, because here's a soda and a candy bar. Go over there and chill out for a little bit, and we'll come talk to you, in 30 minutes. Just go play cards for 30 minutes or whatever, right? And those are the sorts of things that you might think about. And as far as appetite fatigue and saying, if a disaster comes, I'll eat whatever I have to eat to survive. If you look back historically, say the Great Irish Potato Famine, it was just the potatoes that had the blight. The barley and the wheat and the corn and all those things grew. That was fine. That they had a normal harvest. But those things were considered to be horse food, cattle food. And people would starve to death rather than eat things that they thought were for animals. So as you look at this, you have to also realize, what are you planning for? There's a difference between a short-term disaster and a long-term depression, 3, 5, 10 years, or some sort of catastrophic disaster where the life will never be normal, because you can't store enough for the rest of your life. You're eventually going to run out of supplies, so you must be able to make your own food. And that's why we do rabbits and bees and chickens and stuff here at our house. If you've got all this stuff, you've got to store it somewhere. An organization is the key. And you want to lock out moisture, heat, air, light. All those things are things that are going to degrade the things that you store. And you should set some food storage goals. How much food do you want to have? Identify what you've already got, and so you know the shortfall, so you know what you need to get. And keep track of the expiration date so you can rotate your food. We use, and it's on the website, the TN Gun website, the can organizers, little cardboard organizers where you put the food at the top and it rolls down and you take it out of the bottom. Because if you go and do what we do and go buy flats of cans at a time, you buy 18 or 36 or so things of canned corn at a time, you go throw them on the shelf. It's really easy for the old stuff to get pushed back to the back and for you to eat the newest stuff. And then so one day you go and look, and you can't go to the store. You end up at the back of the closet. You've got canned corn from 1907, right? So keep track of your expiration date so you can rotate them out. I like to think of the kitchen cabinets, as what we cook out of, and then my pantry is the grocery store, and we fill up the pantry, and then when we use stuff in the kitchen, we'll go back and fill that up from the pantry, and then when we go shopping, we're filling back that pantry, right? And so we store what we eat, and then we replace what we've used up in our store, right? And if you're going to have this stuff, you're going to need some sort of recipes. If you got 400 pounds of wheat, you better have something to use other than cream of wheat cereal, right? And that all goes back to the list of lists. Once you've got your recipes, then you can start making lists of food that you need to get. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a break, and we're going to have a word from our sponsors. Then we're going to come back and finish what we're talking about. And as always, I would suggest that you go to my website, www.tngun.com.
Summit's Edge Coffee offering premium, organic, and the best tasting coffees from all regions of the world. They have the ability to provide you with endless gourmet selections. Summit's Edge also carries coffee sauces and syrups and the best tasting teas to be found. They carry Dr. Smoothie products that are all natural and shelf stable. Summit's Edge Coffee, the prepper's choice in coffee. Find them on the web at summitedgecoffee.com.
All right, so next up, before we left, we were talking about food. Then we had a commercial for coffee. What do you got to have coffee? You got to have water. And as a prepper, you should know you're never going to be able to store enough water. You know, FEMA, Red Cross, Ready.gov, all the different websites will tell you 1 gallon of water per person per day. And, you know, that's only if you don't want clean clothes and clean dishes, right? You know, that's drinking water and you know, sponge bath, right? So you're going to need a significant amount of water. And you're going to need buckets to carry the water. And you're going to need rain barrels. And then you're going to have some sort of means of water purification. And because water is, the only thing more important than water is shelter and air, right? You'll die within days of not having water. So it's so important, so you need to have some redundant systems in place. You know, we've got stored water. We've got stored water frozen in the freezer. We've got a creek nearby that's identified. We've got a creek a little farther away that's identified that's not as well known. We have rain barrels. We've got filters. We have bleach. We have the ability to make bleach. And then we have the ability to make liquid chlorine that we can turn into bleach. So we've got several different ways of purifying water because it's just that important. You know, how do we afford all this stuff? Because I'll tell you, I'm just a state employee, low-level state employee. My wife is a school teacher, and all this prepping stuff can get expensive, right? You just have to have priorities. And, you know, with that, prepping is very important, but like I said, it's just a means of making your life a little bit better. So don't put off your bills to prepare, right? You know, if you can't afford to go, you know, pay cash for the Barrett 50, then, you know, as much as a Barrett 50 might make your plan just a little bit better, you probably shouldn't go buy a $9,000 rifle, right? Because self-reliance is financial stability. If you have credit card people just beating down your door, it's really hard to say that you're self-reliant. But I will tell you that if you do it correctly, prepping as a lifestyle can mean savings. Buying in bulk, right, is a great way of saving money. You know, our food storage, you know, we're eating food from, you know, 2010, 2011. And let me tell you, food prices back in 2010, 2011 are a lot cheaper than they are in 2012 and 2013. And I would hazard a guess to say, especially if they make this $1 trillion coin and blow up our economy like the Weimar Republic, food prices in 2012 are going to be a lot cheaper than food prices in 2014. So, you know, storage means that you're eating things at cheaper prices. And we also try to follow the alpha strategy. A lot of folks want to store gold and store junk silver, and that's okay. That's one way of looking at it. But I just think of it as this. If you're saving money and you're putting it into gold or other, you know, liquid investments or semi-liquid investments in order to have money to buy the things that you need, what happens when there's some sort of crisis or just inflation and the things that you need are increasing in value faster than the money that you save, right? And let's just look at it as wheat grinders, right? You know, wheat grinder, a cheap one's $40 today. What happens if there's some sort of economic collapse and people are living off of their stored wheat and people are starting to grow their own grains and things, you know? And people realize they have to have a wheat grinder if they're going to survive. Or they realize that pounding wheat with iron pipe in a number 10 can just ain't kicking it for them. Do you think that you know, I'm going to sell somebody my $40 wheat grinder if that's the only thing I've got? You know, probably not. Same with guns, right? And so rather than saving money to buy things that I need, I buy the things that I think I'm going to need in the future, and I buy duplicates of it because I have the sneaking suspicion that in the long-term collapse, manufactured first world items will be worth more than paper fiat currency. And, I could be wrong, but I really don't think so. It's not all beans, bullets, and band-aids, right? You're also going to need tools, and you're going to need clothes, and you're going to need boots that fit and broke in. You're going to need gloves. The Selco course that I've been talking about for a couple months now. He was talking about how in normal times you get a cut on your hand from working, in the shop or whatever. You just put some Neosporin on it, and everything's fine. But in a grid down, into the world as we know it scenario, like they had in the Yugoslav war, you cut your hand, it gets infected. You can lose your hand, you can get gangrene, you can die. So protecting your hands is something that we don't think about now, but is very important. Without electricity, it's going to be cold, cold winter, so you're going to want warm clothes. And hygiene is an issue. Sickness is a discomfort today, but it can kill you when times are bad. If you get diarrhea, and you're having to, go out and get on your own water, and you can't flush your own toilets. It can kill you, So you want to make sure that you have soap and alcohol and disinfectants and, a means to get a good stable source of water so that you can stay clean, so you can keep your clothes clean. And that's why, on the website we've got those homemade laundry soap and homemade washers out of plungers and things, because hygiene is something that a lot of preppers don't think about, but is a lot more important than just, I don't want to stink. It's a life-saving issue. Another thing I want to say is it gets dark in their hills, right? If there's no power, it gets dark, and you're going to want a means to see in the dark. And batteries only last so long, and fuel, gas can be hard to come by. If you've got candles, even if you've got bees and you're making your own candles, candles need to be watched. You don't want to burn down your shelter, right? So you need to go ahead now, figure out what you're going to do, what your options are. I like in this part of the presentation when I'm out at a group, I make an olive oil candle or a Crisco candle just so people can see that there are plenty of options out there. But we have a lot of solar batteries and a lot of solar chargers for our batteries, not necessarily run our house, but to keep our flashlights and our, radios and things working. So you need to consider, how are you going to live without power? But even though it's not all about beans, bullets, and band-aids, beans, bullets, and band-aids are important, especially the band-aids, because stuff happens, right? You're going to need basic medical supplies and some skill in using them. Especially if you're thinking of some sort of catastrophic economic collapse that causes some sort of government, overreach that ends up with some sort of revolution or war, right? Meaning gunshots. It takes a whole lot of medical supplies to deal with, injuries the way that modern medicine deals with injuries. So rather than getting a whole bunch of fancy equipment, get lots and lots of simple supplies, lots of gauze, lots of tampons for, bullet wounds, and, lots of bandages and band-aids and disinfectants and those sorts of things. You can get suture kits. You can spend about $30 and get a stapler, but you need to be able to use the equipment that you get. Okay, a lot of books out there about using vet meds, and we've done that here. And I've tried to use super glue. The dog gets cut or whatever, using super glue there, but it takes a little bit of practice. It takes a little bit of know-how, and you have to be careful because those loopholes are starting to close. Veterinary Association is starting to lobby to require prescriptions to get a lot of those co-op antibiotics, so it's something to think about. Military, for a weapon system to be considered fully operational, a vehicle, a tanker, or a helicopter, whatever, needs to be able to shoot, move, and communicate. If it can't shoot, move, or communicate, it is no use. And shooting and moving, that's not a part of this conversation, but the communication is. You need a means to communicate. And I'm not talking necessarily about ham radio or other technological means. Those are important, but it's not the only aspect. You need a plan, simple, workable, and something that you've tested. Just the other day, my wife and I were talking about, we live in one town, which is about a 45-minute drive to Nashville, and I work in Nashville. Well, my wife works in a town that's about 45 minutes from where I work, and it too is about 45 minutes from the house. So we're in a triangle, and each side's about 45 minutes longer, much longer in rush hour, right? And so the kids at the babysitter, near our house. And so if we had a disaster, am I to go check on the baby and the wife go check on the baby? Or are we going to trust the baby to the babysitter and I'm going to go try to get my wife and get her home, right? So we have to think about that now and ahead of time. And if the plan is for me to go to the house, get the baby, and then come back and get her, what happens if she's trying to get home, goes the normal route, something happens, and so she takes a side road because there's plenty of other alternate routes to get home, and we've talked about those. How do I know that she's went somewhere else if cell phone towers and stuff are out? Is she going to put a colored rock at a certain intersection, or am I supposed to look for a broken tree limb at an intersection, or a handkerchief, or how are we going to communicate? And those are things that we are working out at our house so that we can communicate and talk and let each other know where we're at. But once you've made your decision, it's not a plan unless all the people who are going to work in the plan know the plan. And let me give you some little things that I know to be true. And cell phones, it's pretty common knowledge that in a disaster, cell phones, towers get overwhelmed. A lot of people, but it's not as widely known, but a lot of people already know that text messages use a lot smaller bandwidth. And so they can get through a lot of times when a phone call cannot. And it's also stacked up in the system. So if I try to text you, I'm going to be late, or I'm going alternate route Bravo, right? And I go to text you, and I hit send, and it's trying to send, but the cell tower is busy, right? So I go do something else. If the cell tower has a little bit of space, that message is going to send. Where with a phone call, I try to call you, I don't get an answer, so I hang up. It's not going to keep trying to do that. So it's text message is a lot better means to communicate. Also, having a out of area code number is also very useful. A lot of times the cell tower will reject calls made from the area code, from a number in the area code of the tower, but it will accept out of area code numbers. That happened in my family in the Tuscaloosa tornadoes down in northern Alabama. My wife, she had an Alabama number and could not call her parents. And, in town, the daddy, my father-in-law is at the farm, mother-in-law is at the school, and the sister-in-law is at work. And they're all within 15 minutes of each other. They could not call. My wife could not call them. They could not call my wife. But I could call with my Nashville number and reach them. And so what we did is I just called and said, every hour or so, are you okay? Do you need your messages sent? And they'd say, yeah, go find out what, Amy's doing. So I'd call sister-in-law, and I'd and we'd pass messages back and forth. And that's something you need to think about. And if that's the case, having an out-of-state contact, you need to tell your out-of-state contact people are going to call them, right? Make sure everybody knows that number. So, that's just some things to think about as far as commo goes. Now, this is Brass Call, and we are the gun part of the Anything Prepping Network. But, so we're going to take a second to talk about guns. Noah had a little bit of protection, and you need a little bit of protection. You need some guns, because guess what? All those woodpeckers that were like, you're, trying to poke holes in this plan. This sucks. You shouldn't do it. Come on and come out with us. Let's go to Vegas. Why are you wasting money on that? Right? Well, it wasn't so stupid when the floods came. And when the floods came, guess what? Woodpeckers came back. But now they're panicked. Now it's not pecking on the thing, you suck. Now it's beating on the thing, let us in. Let us in. And guess what? They were angry, because fear and anger are biologically linked. When you scare somebody, you make them mad. Right? Zombies. You got all these scared people going out their mind. How am I going to feed my kids? How am I going to feed my wife? How am I going to stay? How am I going to live? Right? And so you got to have some sort of means to protect yourself against those people that want to take your stuff, that are willing to let you die because they didn't prepare, right? And a lot of preppers, and when I say preppers in this case, my fingers are making the little air, um, the little air quotation marks. Some preppers, firearms are their sole means of disaster preparedness, and I'll tell you, no uncertain terms. If you're a prepper and your whole plan is all guns, no food, you're prepping on becoming a murderer, a criminal, a bandit. Some preppers are all touchy feely and all, ooh, let's be green and whatever, and that's great. But they kumbaya and eat rainbow stew, and they don't have any weapons. No uncertain terms again. All food, no guns means you're planning on getting yourself robbed, murdered, and raped for your stuff, right? You're gonna need to have a little of both, and you need to have some common sense about it. The world has went on for millennium without AR-15s, right? Our ancestors survived very fine without AR-15s. However, on the flip side of that coin, their neighbors didn't have AR-15s either, right? If everybody's got sticks and stones, you better get you a stick and you better get you a stone. But you don't have to spend all your money and all your attention on the nifty, neediest, coolest gun. If all you've got's a 22, make sure you know how to use a 22 effectively and where to hit to get good stopping power. Okay? So don't have your ego in your gun, but by all means, go get a gun. I've said all along that I'm not an expert and I don't know everything, right? I know a lot of stuff, but I don't know everything. Things I know, because I try to catch a lot of stuff, I'm not an expert in very much at all, right? So nobody can do everything, and nobody knows everything. So guess what? Everybody needs a little bit of help. You must have help. And if you don't believe me, and this works for several things, remember in the beginning we said we'd come back talking about practicing your plan, exercising your plan. I want you to try this experiment. And don't just think about it. Don't just say, yeah, I see where it's coming from. I want you to do it, right? Schedule a time with the family, you know. No going over on sleepovers, and no, daddy's crazy and he's going to make us whatever, so I'm going to go somewhere else. Everybody there, everybody does it. Go turn your water off at the meter. Go flip your circuit breaker off, right? Only use the supplies that you have on hand at your house. And do that for a weekend. Friday night, Saturday to Sunday night, right? And it's not just a camping experiment. It's not just to see what gear that you need or how well that you live. Because part of this experiment is, how do we flush the toilet? What do we do with our poop? With no water and no power, right? How do we cook food? How do we stay warm? All those things that you'll learn or work out, or say, we really need more blankets, or we really need more buckets, or we really need more water. Things that you'll learn. But while you're doing that, realize there's people out there trying to get what you've got. So guard your location. That means somebody stays up, and not just for security against people, but security against some candles lighting the house on fire, right? Or your wood burning stove making everybody get carbon monoxide. So guard your location, guard your supplies, and while you're doing that security role, try to figure out who's going to cook, who's going to clean, and who's going to gather firewood, because prepping is a manpower intensive exercise. If you look at historical cases, Argentina, you look at Weimar Republic, you look at you know the Yugoslav wars, disasters ramp up, right? It's kind of like a bell curve. In the beginning, you don't have enough resources, and every person in your group is that much drained on the resources. But after a while, you start to stabilize, and then you realize that without power, you're going to need manpower, right? If you're going to try to grow your own food, that's a labor-intensive organization. It's a big difference between using a machine to make tools and things and having to beat it out on a stick, with a rock over a fire, right? And so you're going to need people. More people that you have, as long as you have the supplies to sustain them, is the better you're going to be. So you're going to need a group. Noah wasn't just protecting his family, and he wasn't, he was ensuring that the human race would continue to survive, right? And the purpose of the ark was to ensure survival of everything, right? And charity is a vital part of the Reliant lifestyle. Y'all might remember when that whole preppers are selfish thing kicked up. I was one of the guys saying, no, that's stupid. Preppers are not selfish. Everything a prepper does is for the benefit of society, because even if he doesn't share, that's one less person that's not in the bread line. That's more resources to people who have not prepared, right? But I would say that you have a duty to protect people that cannot protect themselves, not won't protect themselves, but can't protect themselves. You know, biblically, and that's how I roll, or at least try to, as much as possible. I'm not perfect with that, but the Bible sets forth protection for widows and orphans. And as long as I can do that, I'm going to try to have charity toward other people. But I also have to realize my first priority is protecting my family. And so I have to prioritize my charity and ensure that my charity is helpful to those receiving it and does not endanger my family. I'm not just going to bring somebody in and take them to the food storage shelf and get a bag and say, this is all I can afford to give you. And they get a little bag and they say, I got a whole bunch of other stuff, because guess what? They leave and they come back, and they bring other people. Okay? So I've got to figure out, depending on the situation, am I going to have a dead drop? Am I going to give food to the church and let the church give it out? How am I going to do with charity? But charity is something that, as a prepper, you should consider, you should think about. The ark wasn't built in a day. And like I've said before, prepping isn't, you know, um, a race. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon. And you should think about it. You should ponder on it. You should plan about it. Yeah, I think you should pray about it. Self-reliance isn't easy. But if you're stupid, it gets hard, right? Or harder. You need to spend a lot of time being thoughtful. If you just start willy-nilly throwing stuff together, you're going to end up spinning your wheels and buying a lot of stuff that might not be the best use of your limited resources. So I would say inventory what you already have, and not just stuff, but your skills. What can you do, right? Make another list. You've got your list of what you can do and what you've got. Make a list of what do you need to be able to do. What do you need to have, right? What do you want? What would make things easier, right? And then from those two, you could come up with what you need to still get, right? Use your plan. Use it to rotate your supplies. Not only does rotating keep your stock fresh, but it helps you learn to operate your equipment, right? If you have a 72-hour kit, you put some batteries in it, you never touch it. 5 years later, you open it up, guess what? Your battery's probably corroded and leaked, right? So rotate your stuff. And once you've made your plans, once you've made these big grand lists and say, I need to learn this, I need to do this, freaking do it. Your survival depends on it. Good intentions, they're good intentions, but guess what? They're not worth anything. Get out. I don't care, how busy you are. I don't care that you wanted to do it. Or I don't, something happens. I don't care what you meant to do. What matters is what you did do. So, get off your tail, get out there and actually practice this stuff. So, disaster can strike at any time, right? But I don't sweat it because, like I've said before, I'm not scared because I'm prepared. I do the best that I can. But I've got a plan, and I'm living my plan. I'm working toward my plan. And I know that something will happen eventually. It might not be New Madrid. It might not be an economic collapse. It might not be a revolution. It might not be whatever. But I know something's going to happen. But every day that it doesn't happen is one more day that I've prepped. And that makes it, when it does happen, I'm just a little bit better, a little easier for me to deal with it, going to be a little bit more comfortable, get a little better odds at surviving, right? Self-reliance is a lifestyle. It's something I do because I believe in it, because I enjoy doing it, and because I think it's important. It's not a race, right? And it's not about ego, and it's not about, names. What works for me And what I do might not work for you. We have different personalities. We live in different locations. We've got different family members. We've got different budgets, right? But I will tell you this: if you drop everything that you're doing and you neglect your family, you neglect those relationships, and you don't pay your bills, and everything goes toward prepping, right? You might do that because you love your family and you're trying to protect them, but you're also risking damaging those relationships and burning out, right? And I'll just tell you, if prepping does not make your life easier, more fulfilled, and better, then you're doing it wrong and you need to reassess what you're doing. We're not tinfoil paranoid freaks, right? We're responsible human beings who care about our families, who want to keep them protected because we love them. And so what we do should show that, all right? So anyway, I appreciate you listening to me. I know it's not necessarily a gun thing that we talked about today, and we'll get back to the gun stuff. But if you're interested in learning anything else, you can always go to my website at www.tngun.com. I've got all sorts of free resources, a lot of very good free downloads, military manuals, videos, all sorts of stuff, articles, firearms classes, and I might not know it, but I could probably find you the answer to things or put you in touch with people who can. So email me with comments or questions or things that you want to talk about, or just, tell me that I suck and you hate me. I don't care, but it's really hard for me to give you shows that you enjoy without some feedback. Okay? So there you go. You can find me online at www.tngun.com. And this is David for Brass Call. Thank you for listening.